I'm Lana McAra, and this is Carb Addict, now Carnivore. Today, I am delighted to welcome to the broadcast Michael Collins from sugaraddiction.com, and you can tell why I wanted him here. Welcome, Mike.
How are you? Thanks for having me. It's an honor. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Thank you so much for coming, spending your time. Now, are you in the U.S.?
I'm in Santa Monica, California. Yep.
You're in California. Okay. Okay. Awesome. Well, I always start out by asking people, how did you get into this conversation? Where did the journey actually start to talk about sugar addiction?
That's a great question. I have the podcast version. It usually brings up more questions than it answers, but actually it started a generation or two generations ago, actually. My grandmother, my mother's mother, died when she was only 8 years old. And they had to move in with my great aunt, my grandfather and her, because she was the youngest and there was no kids left and my grandfather had to work. But they owned a kind of a four corners, and they owned the country store. The family owned the country store across the way. And my grandfather made a deal with his cousin Jim that anytime my mother walked into that store, she could have anything she wanted, just put it on his tab. And it was a wonderful gesture for someone, an 8-year-old who just lost her mom. But it literally taught my mother something that I believe she died with. And I believe she died of sugar addiction, not Alzheimer's, is that sugar is love. And that's how I was raised. That's how I grew up. I mean, it's just obscene the amount of sugar we had access to. And, never once did my mother say anything like, don't eat so much sugar. It wasn't something that we had unfettered access to the sugar bowl. We could put as much sugar on our cornflakes and Cheerios as we wanted, scrape off half an inch with the milk at the bottom. I got that sugar bowl from the estate, like three cups of sugar when it's supposed to be 1 cup for Kool-Aid and, bread and butter and sugar sandwiches. Anyway, I just grew up with all kinds of candy. I mean, just insane amounts of candy. I mean, I was still trick-or-treating at 13 or 14, bringing in huge hordes of candy. So I had it for months. And so I didn't realize at that time, here's the important part that will be a thread through the entire conversation, I hope, is that I didn't realize that, that sugar was changing my state. My father was an alcoholic. He was pretty physically violent. He was a Marine. He had probably had PTSD from the Korean War. And and so I didn't realize I was soothing myself with sugar, right? I didn't know that, but fast forward to 13 or 14, and I ran into beer, and I knew that changed my state. I was kind of shy, and I could drink beer behind the high school and talk to girls at the dance. Well, that party lasted till I'm 28, till I was about 28 years old. And that, I'm kind of an open book. We can talk about that, but I got, we'll stick with the sugar. I, excuse me, got something in my throat. I got sober at 28, and I wanted to get healthy. And I read a book called Sugar Blues. And Sugar Blues was about a guy named William Duffy, who eventually married Gloria Swanson, who was really into this the famous movie star, was really into this no sugar stuff, right? And they promoted that book all over. And so I read it in the early 80s. And I don't know, it just got in my head, And so over time, about 3 years into sobriety, I quit sugar, flour, and then eventually caffeine. And or I think I quit caffeine first, actually, which I suggest if anyone's going to attempt this: caffeine, sugar, then flour. I used to drink diet after that. Well, anyway, I don't know. It's all kind of jumbled up in there. I could tell you my sobriety date, but I couldn't tell you the day I last used sugar. It just took a long time, and that's what I try and do, is save people that time. Anyway, I raised a couple of sugar-free kids. Somehow I talked my wife at the time into having kids with no sugar in the womb or flour or caffeine until they were, and that lasted until they're about 6 years old. And they ended up like once a month when they went out the outside birthday parties, but never at home through their whole childhood. And they always said, Dad, you should write a book, right? Well, I had a regular life and career. I wasn't my thing back then. I would help alcoholics and drug addicts get clean and sober, but that also wasn't my career. So in 2018, I did write the book. I bought the website sugaraddiction.com, or the domain name sugaraddiction.com, in about 09 or 08, and put up a really basic site, gave great information, but no one really, a few people took it and ran with it, but for the most part, it wasn't until about 6 or 7 years ago when I started coaching, was kind of semi-retired, and I started running groups online and group functions and coaching and stuff, that it really kind of took off. The Sugar-Free Man came into being when Google started shutting down the term addiction, mostly for pirates that were running people to addiction treatment centers, but they just didn't like the word. Neither did Google. So I had to develop kind of a separate brand, but they've eased off on that. So sugar addiction is now okay, I guess, sort of, whatever. But anyway, long story short, that's kind of how I got here. Now we run coaching trainings, and we have 4 and 5 and 6 meetings every single day, support meetings, and we train coaches. We got coaches and group meetings and, challenges and all that kind of good stuff. So that's the short version, how I got here, how I ended up as the Sugar-Free Man, and how I started working with people. It just got in my head. It was something that I just got a hold of. I think Duffy had a lot to do with it, the Sugar Blues book. There's kind of a folklore in my family of my father quitting cigarettes, that he went to a cancer unit to see one of his relatives, and they were smoking through the trach tube, and he just quit cold turkey. Now, I wish he'd have quit drinking then, but anyway, there's kind of a mythology, or, whatever, lore in the family about that cigarette smoking quitting. And so I don't know, quitting sugar, and it just kind of stuck with me. And the information about sugar has been around for a long time. And I think Duffy's book really flipped me over into believing it in a deep way. So that's kind of how I ended up here.
So the book was Sugar Blues.
Sugar Blues by William Duffy. Yeah?
Okay, awesome. You wouldn't believe how many people that I've talked to on this channel who say that they quit alcohol sometime around the same time that they stopped eating carbohydrates.
Yeah.
I don't know if any studies have been done about a correlation there or not, but it's really interesting how many people talk about that. I'm sure you've run into that as well.
Yeah, interesting. When I went public, like, I was pretty anonymous about my alcohol and substance use disorder stuff. But about 3 or 4 years ago, I just said, hell with it. I started to believe in the Recovery Out Loud movement, which is helping reduce the stigma of it all. And, like, no exaggeration, and still to this day continuing, we got flooded with recovering folks, people who had quit sugar or quit alcohol, drugs, whatever, but they still couldn't put down the sugar. I'm on about 50 podcasts where some version of, I'm halfway through the podcast on recovery podcast now, and the host says to me, Mike, the reason I had you on is because I've been sober 10 years and I can't quit sugar. And so it's been and that's still one of the fastest growing groups. And I think the best, because when I get somebody, most people come to me for weight loss, they think they figured out that they can do diets, but they can't do the sugar part, and, but they take a while to unbrainwash from the diet culture of eat less and exercise more. But the folks from the addiction world, they already get the addiction piece. They already realize, like I did, genuinely, I probably left that part of the story out, is that when I got sober, I went right back to sugar. In other words, I just started eating like crap, and I was drinking 16-ounce Mountain Dews, 6 or 8 of them a day, I mean, it was, and my face was like, the only thing I didn't want to have when I was a drinker is that the big nose that my grandfather had, you know, the big red nose. Well, I had that and acne and rosacea and the whole thing. And from sugar, not from booze, but from sugar. So yeah, I mean, you gotta, I think my message really is that this is a substance use disorder. After 2 decades of helping drug addicts, this is worse, in my opinion, and the people that are recovering, to a man, to a woman, everyone that got sober from drugs and alcohol who tried to quit sugar afterwards said it was harder to quit sugar than it was drugs or alcohol. So that in and of itself, I think, is an important um, data point. Like, again, I mean, I want to get more clarity. I want to try to get some grad students in here and start quantifying this, but it's absolutely true. You know, alcohol is straight sugar. There's a lot of fructose in red wine. Every time someone drinks alcohol, they can start with the sugar process, but they want to have a wine on a Friday night. They go right back to the sugar because it just stimulates the craving. So yeah, there's definitely a correlation of some sort there.
Yes, for sure.
Correlation. Yeah.
I interviewed Dr. Joan Ifland. Are you familiar with her?
Yeah, Joan and I are friends. She's on our
Uh,
summits. Yeah.
yes, yes, and she said that they did a test, an experiment with rats, and they had all these different illegal substances, and they had sugar, and the rats would go to the sugar immediately. They didn't care about heroin or any of that other stuff. They
Exactly.
wanted the sugar. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
It's and I think if sugar were priced in that range, people would be doing crazy things to get sugar too, you know, if it
Oh, yeah.
wasn't freely available.
Yes, yes. So, what would you recommend as one of the first steps to getting clean from sugar?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So look, you know, one of the things that I try and like, I'm gonna like shoot you straight with no, which is kind of what I did with the, you know, in the early days. But I have to warn you that everything that I'm saying has to be, you can find on Dr. Google, you know, but everything has to be tempered and has to be deeply understood that, and I'm sure Joan mentioned this, is that you need support in this effort. There is no way to do this alone. It's too new, if you will. It's too accepted in society. You can give this product to a baby, a 1 year old, and nobody's going to bother you legally, morally, ethically. It's not a problem, right? And people are having a difficult time accepting that this is as powerful a drug as drugs or alcohol in modifying your mood and destroying your body and stuff. And it's really the dose makes the poison. So you have to understand the first thing is that you're not going to do this alone. It's just not going to happen. I've just had too many experiences of people trying to do it on their own by just information. Um, and so that's the first thing you need to know. The second part is there are certain amounts of people who cannot moderate, okay? That abstinence is required. That's 100% abstinence from flour and sugar. Flour is just sugar molecules holding hands. I like that phrase. And it keeps the cravings alive. And who the hell wants to do this if you're always craving sugar? And so you have to try abstinence. We call it a scratch test around here, meaning, you know, like if you're scratched for dust or ragweed or pollen, we'll see if you're allergic to it, right? Well, here we like a 90-day scratch test. Just you're an adult, let's try and get you off sugar for 90 straight days and see how you feel, how your skin looks, how your weight is with your rheumatoid arthritis, your arms and or your knees and your hands stop hurting, that kind of stuff. And so it's just important as an adult to take this seriously and try and get a little bit of abstinence. Now, about a third, like people always ask, well, do I have to do this for the rest of my life, Mike? And the answer is maybe. You know, about a third of people. I used to be the president of the Food Addiction Institute, worked with people who've been doing this for 20 or 30 years. And they came to these numbers, which are pretty solid. They actually track with the obesity numbers, is that about a third of people biochemically cannot ingest sugar. They literally start craving more, and that would be the obesity folks. And then the middle group is what we call harmful users. And harmful users are people who, because 85% of the food in the grocery store has sugar in it, they have over time, gained 2 or 3 pounds since high school or college a year. And now they're overweight, they're pre-diabetic, and they need to do something about it. And if they reset and they stop for a time and heal up, they may be able to use sugar at a birthday or a holiday celebration. And then there's about a third of people, we hate all them. No, just kidding. Like, those folks can normally ingest sugar, like your friend who can have half a glass of wine and not have a problem. Now, I want to make one clarification, in that you can be a very thin sugar addict. We have an Olympic athlete that's gone through our program, and we have 2 coaches that are ultra marathoners who were carrying 15 extra pounds, running 100 miles a week. And you can definitely be a very thin sugar addict. And have visceral fat. You've heard that term, TOFI, thin on the outside, fat on the inside, that in your visceral fat, And so, but that's about the rough breakdown. And again, it maps with the obesity numbers: a third obese, a third overweight, and a third of normal size. I mean, the actual numbers, strangely enough, 78% of people who died of COVID were obese. And they believe that upwards of 90% or more of people are not metabolically healthy. So they have a metabolic dysfunction of sorts, which is marked by, elevated glucose and that kind of thing. So, or, close to pre-diabetic. So yeah, it's a tough one. And, you've kind of got to know where you fall on it. Obviously, if you've got some weight to lose. Now, I want to also clarify that losing weight is why people start the process, but they stay in the process for different reasons, mostly because their brain comes back online. They can focus better, they can remember better, they can, they're not as irritable. A lot of different things happen, and people just love that. They didn't expect that, they thought they were just aging, and so they were forgetting things or what have you. But yeah, there's a lot to it. And like, but the main, look, we know you got to eat whole food. Okay. Like, that's just a given. But I think people get a little bent a little bit about the abstinence part. Remember that the abstinence part is just for a 90 days to see if you can like readjust and see where you are. If I ever get 90 full days out of somebody, they almost never want to go back. They may slip, they may, whatever, but they almost never want to go back to their old life. They want to continue sugar, as close to sugar-free as they can get. So I know that's a long answer to your short question.
Oh, that's awesome. That's terrific. I was going to ask you what happens after 90 days.
No, well, it shifts from a physical game to an emotional game. Okay. It shifts from a physical biochemical reaction. You actually get a little bit more time to think it through. There's no like instant gratification. Automatically you're at the 7-Eleven with something in your mouth where you didn't really get to think about it. You get to think it all the way through. But that said, and it's a great question, in that, look, at the end of the day, what this is as a substance use disorder has unconsciously, because of the food system we have and different habits in different families, people have used sugar as an emotional management tool their entire lives. Okay. They started using likely in the womb, but when they were babies, and unconsciously when they are hurt, fearful, angry, upset, worried, they would ingest sugar and it would stop for a few minutes. They could manage it, right? And this is very common. I mean, you hear about it a lot, but most people don't take it to the extreme or don't understand it, that this dose of 30, 40, 50 teaspoons a day for some people is enough to hold back emotions and to feel very differently. There's a great book out there, The Body Keeps the Score, which kind of documents all this. And it's like when they get off the sugar, they begin this process of reconfiguring how they manage their emotions, right? And this is the most important part of the message. As I said, when I ran into the beer, like you have to cognitively understand this. You have to bring it from your subconscious to your unconscious, subconscious to your conscious awareness that you were actually doing this. And the way that you do that is to continue to find other ways to manage. We call it self-soothe, dopamine, get hits of dopamine without using a substance. Okay. And how that happens is you exercise, or you go to yoga, or you get a hug, or you get a manicure, or a massage, or a pedicure, or something, and you do a self-care ritual that substitutes for the substance-based self-soothing. It's really, we've learned to hack a 10 million year old system that was created to find food and sex, dopamine, serotonin, all these brain reward chemicals. And we've been able to hack it by sitting on the couch and just eating sugar. So we get this nice feeling. It lasts 20 or 30 minutes, and then you have to re-ingest. And like any addiction, that will bite you eventually if you got to keep re-ingesting. And we know what sugar does to the body. We've always known what the glucose does to the body, not always, but diabetes, heart disease, for many decades. What is not well known, or as is coming more important, is the fructose half of the molecule. And the table sugar molecule is half fructose and half glucose, right? But the fructose half, the research is now, you can read this book here, Nature Wants You to Be Fat, by Richard Johnson, and he will describe in it the psychoactive nature of fructose and why he's theorized was created in animals and humans, and it creates behavioral changes, right? And when you're like foraging, risky behavior to get to the fruit or the fructose or whatever, and it really is how shall I say, Dr. Johnson believes, and he's created a company, that if he can block the fructose pathway, he can cure alcoholism. This is how behavioral fructose has become in the human brain, or the study of and the understanding of fructose in the human brain has become. And so it's super important to understand. I always say, if you want to quit sugar, study fructose, because that's the science. It's only really 10 or 12 years old, 15 years old, the real advanced science on fructose. And the real explosions have happened in the last 5 or 10 years. So what you want to do really is to understand why you can't stop or stay stopped. And that's what happens after day 30, 60, or 90. We call it Detox to Lifestyle. We have a program where you have to still get that additional support, because for a year or two, you will be healing your brain. You'll be readjusting to the world, naked of your comfort food, naked of your crutch or your coping mechanism of sugar. And you're going to need to learn new skills of saying no and setting boundaries and not going to events that you thought might be dangerous, or whatever, that you might ingest sugar at. So there's a lot of behavioral changes and readjustments in your life in order to stay off sugar. And that's really the goal. It's these detoxes that you see in the marketplace are just because sugar, detoxes are hot right now. Okay. So they're kind of, when I started, there was like 2 books on sugar detox on Amazon. Now there's 300 or something. And it really has grown in the last decade. And people are bolting sugar detoxes onto their weightlifting program, their thyroid program, their bone density program, their shakes and pill programs. Even heck, Good Housekeeping has an issue out on the stands, a sugar detox. I mean, it never ends, right? But and this is a huge but, it's not going to last. It's all junk. It's all crap. And I don't usually say that about my contemporaries because they're all raising the awareness of the sugar stuff. But in the long run, the answer to your question has to be a deep understanding that you're not trying to change the sweet taste on your mouth or the things that you're putting in your mouth. You're actually changing the behavior of how you access self-soothing and dopamine, okay? And that one golden key to the golden lock, I believe, is the answer to the obesity crisis, the diabetes pandemic, the obesity pandemic, if you will. And until people start to realize this, and it's a very experiential thing. This is not something you can learn from a book. It's not something you can learn in isolation. You have to be, as Joan would say, mirror neurons with 6 or 10 people on a Zoom meeting, or better in person, but who are doing the same thing. Let me tell you a true statistic. 85% of the people we work with do not have their spouse's support, let alone the rest of their family, the people that live in their house, okay? They're not on board. They got a credibility problem. They've tried 10 diets and changed the food in their house 10 times. They don't want to hear it anymore. And so your quitting sugar this time is not something they're participating in. And so you got to have a support system other than your family or your friend group. So yeah, I'm really thankful that you're having it this way, this interview, because it does take about the arc of a podcast or a summit interview to explain the whole thing, because everybody has reduced it to such ridiculousness of eat less and exercise more if they're talking about weight loss, right? But the sustainability, which goes back to my long answer to your short question, is that the sustainability, the long-term sustainability, is a behavior modification that is rooted in substance use disorder recovery, if that makes sense. It's not literally anything to do with food, diet, exercise. It doesn't have anything. And like I said, with those other detoxes, 98% of them are talking about cut back this, drink more water, blah, 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 stuff that, like, yeah, it would help, but it's not going to keep it. If you've kind of, and you have to diagnose yourself. If you said to yourself, you've tried a bunch of diets, you can do the diets, but you can't get off the sugar, maybe you need to look at the sugar dependency part of your personality and your physical biome, your physical bodily makeup, So yeah, it seems complicated, but really it's not. It's not rocket science. It's just a different paradigm of change, of recovery, right? It's a different way of looking at quote unquote weight loss or whatever, or, diabetes or pre-diabetes. So yeah, it's you can tell I'm a little fascinated by it all. It interests the hell out of me, and I keep learning about it, interviewing people and like that.
The further along the further along I go in these conversations, the more fascinated I become,
Right.
because in Dr. Iflin's interview, she gave the 6 criteria to know if you're addicted,
Yep.
which I had all 6. And I used to prowl through the kitchen at night. I'd eat dinner, go back to the kitchen, and about every 30 minutes, just like you said, until I finally went to bed, I was back in the kitchen and just looking around, like what's in the fridge, what's in the freezer, what's in the cabinet, and just make a cycle. And I say it like a lion prowling at night, looking
Yeah.
for something else.
Sure.
And I would just get this urgency inside me that wouldn't go away. And I knew that I wouldn't sleep. If I went to bed in that condition, I would be up out of bed looking for something because I would not be able to rest.
Right.
Thank God that's gone. I've been on the carnivore lifestyle now for more than 10 months, about 10 and a half months now. And
Cool.
I lost that early on, maybe by 2 months or so.
Right.
And, But what interests me about what you're saying now, and this is also bringing some ideas. I put together jigsaw puzzles
Okay.
at night, and the jigsaw puzzle has the dopamine hit every time you find a piece.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I like that. That's a good point.
I never thought of that until just now when we were talking.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, I like difficult ones. I like ones that make me work for it. And so I didn't realize that I just started doing that a few months ago. Um,
Okay.
that I have actually been substituting an activity that gives me that hit without having to eat something. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's a good one. I'm going to add that to my list of for folks. That's a, and I'm sure you do get a little hit each time. One of the things that's difficult, and you may relate to this or, have seen people in your work or your experience, is that before you get abstinence, research into anything, food, diet, weight loss, all that kind of stuff is counterproductive in a huge way. And I'll tell you why. You have your folks just Google information gathering and then put dopamine behind it. Information gathering dopamine. What'll come up is peer-reviewed studies, hundreds of them, that prove that gathering information produces dopamine. But I've found it's kind of like talk therapy, okay? People come to me with 20 years of talk therapy experience trying to lose weight, no exaggeration. And they've tried pills, they've tried therapy. But when they go to talk therapy, they've literally unwound it at the 7-Eleven on the way home. And the information gathering, like they'll have an emotional moment, they'll work on it, whatever, trauma, it doesn't matter, problems. And then they'll go unwind it on the way home. Like they'll blunt the emotions again and they'll stop. But where it is effective is exactly how you're using it. Post-abstinent, this happens in our support groups, our advanced support groups, where they're always bringing in new research. It happened yesterday in a big way at a meeting I was chairing. And so there was, two or three new workout plans, a couple of brain things, people were trying new brain stuff. But then it's like substituting for running or weightlifting or some other dopamine producing activity. But before, it's like study sugar, study this, study weight loss, then use sugar. And it's like you're in a vicious circle, right? And then, like I said, that even applies to talk therapy. So, it's always a post abstinence activity, like puzzles or whatever it is. And yeah, and like people come to me so knowledgeable, like more than me, like deep science about nutrition and chemistry and ghrelin and leptin and satiety and carnivore and keto and veget. They've studied it all, but they can't get off. I'll tell you this story. So I spoke at KetoCon last year, and they asked me back this year to be on a panel about food addiction. Okay. So last year, I'm in a breakout room of 180 people, approximately, standing room only, against the wall. And I went hard about this substance use disorder recovery because I figured these folks are keto. They get this, right? Well, they flown to Austin, paid the airfare, paid the hotel, paid for the event, paid for their food. I figured that I can really, spread some more information around, get some feedback, because I'd never presented this information that way, the kind of the way that I'm doing here. And crickets, literally, like some softball questions. And I said, I'll be out on the balcony if somebody wants to talk. One guy came out. But I want to tell you, I spoke Friday morning early. The event lasted for 3 more days. No exaggeration, like 50 people over the course of the 3 days walked up to me and said to me, Mike, in some version of this, I like keto. I love it. I've lost 20 pounds. I've lost 30 pounds. I can do the diet, but I can't quit the sugar. I can't stop using sugar. I keep going back to it. You know what I mean? They didn't want to like raise their hand and be recognized or ask questions in the bigger room, but they were willing to come up and tell me about this. And so you've got to understand that there's a little stigma attached to it. there's a little, like, even in your own house, you're going to have a little pushback, and you've got to get this support system of other people, So yeah, it's it's at this juncture, it's really just pattern recognition. We've done in excess of 20,000 detoxes, thousands of one-on-one coaching clients between myself and the coaches, and the groups and the facilitating groups and stuff. And we can pretty much tell from day one to year one or year 2 or 3, for the most part, everybody's a little biodiverse, but for the most part, we can tell where you're going to be in the process and guide you through it. The biggest failure point is not knowing or not having support when, like, a lot of people can muscle, let's say, 30 days, 60 days, they can lose some weight. But the literature, okay, 95% of all people that lose any amount of weight gain it all back in the first year and then some. And the reason they do that is because they restricted the white stuff. They were exercising hard. They were, their life was going well. But as soon as some little upset comes, financial, relationship, career, comes up, or they start to remember some trauma or something they never got closure on, they fall back and they don't have anyone to turn to. And somehow, and this has always fascinated me about human consciousness, somehow the limbic brain that's looking for that dopamine hit in the brain is able to concoct a conscious, cogent argument that says having sugar would be okay, to rationalize the idea that it's only one, I can start again Monday, whatever it is, that the brain is that powerful. You often wonder about drug addicts and alcoholics, like, why don't they just stop, right? But their brain is dying for this stuff. Now, it's not quite, sometimes people think it's not quite at that level, but it is an urge, and it does begin to operate in your conscious brain that it needs. And literally, blood, and Joan will tell you this, it pulls blood away from your frontal, your rational thinking brain into your deeper limbic brain in order to get this done. So you're not thinking clearly, like Dr. Johnson's research, where you will do risky behaviors. You will, be foraging for food once you get the cravings back. So again, there's science to it. Now there's experience to it, and there's a lot of people out there, not just myself, but lots of people who've been through it and who would like to help you get out of it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you don't have to waste time with some diet or exercise program. You don't even need to exercise at all, literally zero, for weight loss or calorie burning. What you need to exercise for is to assuage your downregulated dopamine system, your brain reward chemicals, all of them, dopamine, serotonin, so that you can get through the anxiety and learn to reconfigure your emotional life by a different self-soothing pattern, if that makes sense, So yeah, it's very frustrating because people don't want to accept this newer paradigm that's evolving in my world, your world, Joan's world, that kind of thing. So
yeah, so that was one of the questions, and I know we're almost out of time, but I want to get this in if you don't mind. And that is the reconfiguring of the brain chemistry.
Yeah.
So that, because the brain inhibits the dopamine, serotonin, waiting for the sugar, waiting for that. How do you actually activate again to normal responses rather than this sugar-addled brain?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. So look, there is no evidence that downregulated or light evidence that downregulated dopamine receptors regenerate. But that said, there's plenty of neuroplasticity, rewiring of the brain, changing the neural pathways to accept walking the dog, yoga, some other self-soothing method that when you think or crave. look, you're never craving a sweet taste on your tongue or a creamy taste on your tongue or a crunchy taste. What you're craving is a dopamine hit. And when people know this, but when I didn't say it, but when I say dopamine, I mean dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, oxytocin, adrenal glands, endorphins, cannabinoid receptors, all of your reward chemicals, right? They're all affected by sugar. And you can literally reprogram your brain. I personally believe my brain is completely rewired. Like people ask me all the time, don't you crave it? Don't you want? I don't even think about it. It's like cardboard. It's like, sugar is like this mouse to me. It's like it's an inanimate object. It's not something like a candy that it doesn't does. There's no energy around it, and it doesn't happen. You know what I mean? My kids that I raise sugar free have no real draw to it. Like they can have one, they actually do occasionally, but they never abuse it. And coming from my family, they never abused alcohol or drugs either, because sugar was and is the original gateway drug, the state changer, the emotion changer, the feelings changer, right? So yeah, again, and it's a great question because this entire answer is in the brain, and it has to be rewired. It's the old wired together, fired together. Sweeteners, caffeine, all of these things trigger your desire to get more sugar. When you eat a sweetener, monk fruit or stevia, people always ask me about this crap, is that your brain gets the sweet, but your stomach doesn't get the calories. So your body craves the real sugar. And again, that's proven fact. But your question, the neuroplasticity, the rewiring of the brain, the grooving of new neural pathways is the goal. Okay. So that sooner or later, you'll be out walking the dog and you'll think to yourself, there was a brief second when I wanted a piece of chocolate. And then you just picked up the leash and you went on a walk. And you have literally, one for one, rewired your brain to do another dopamine producing activity, okay, to change. And that's the goal. That's the behavior change goal, substituting self-soothing. Because look, you're going to be going through these emotional ups and downs in the first year or so. And if you don't lay into place during the detox and beyond these other methods, you can't fight the biochemistry. You cannot fight the change that the body needs to. The brain is kind of dumb. It's a kind of crazy thing to say when I'm talking about consciousness and all this, but if you've trained it to get its dopamine via sugar, it will continue to try and get that easy, simple way. And so you've got to recondition it literally, like an exercise or whatever. You've got to recondition it to get your dopamine hits in another way. And that's through all the things we've mentioned, the different self-soothing. I mean, you can type self-care into Google. You'll get literally, there's lists of 200, 100, 150 ways to self-care. 100, all of them work. All of them will produce dopamine and all the other brain reward chemicals that is not sugar, right? But again, as I mentioned, like do it post-abstinent, not before. Now you can kind of ease into it, I guess, or overlap, but you understand what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to me now as I'm looking back, because I didn't know any of this at the beginning.
Yeah.
But I started to have deep tissue massages around that time every 2 weeks.
That's a good
And
one.
I did that for months. Probably 9 months, every 2 weeks I was going. And I felt a relief after that. So yeah, without realizing it, I have been turning to other things to make myself feel better.
Yeah.
Because sugar now to me, if somebody put a piece of cake in front of me, I would be going like this. I would
Yeah.
get a revulsion inside of me, like, get it away from me. I don't want to even get near it. It's dangerous for me. They might
That's
as well, push me in front of a car or something. I mean, I would be not
yeah.
not wanting to go there. Yeah, because
That's
it's
a good
dangerous.
response at the beginning. I think people do have to be a little afraid of it.
Yeah, yeah, I am.
Just a little
I
bit.
haven't cheated because I'm scared to. I'm terrified.
Yeah. I mean, I think people get afraid if they do something bad or something bad happens when they're drinking or they OD or overdose or have a bad experience, and they're a little afraid of their drug of choice. And yeah, being a little bit afraid in the early days, I think is healthy.
Yeah. Well, this has been tremendously helpful. This is the first time I've talked to anybody about rewiring your brain and your responses to divert away from the sugar into something
Yeah.
different. I think that's extremely healthy to do that. So tell us how to get more from you.
Well, we got a lot. I don't know when this will air, but we've got, the sugaraddiction.com is the main website, and you can download a free copy of my Amazon book. It was an Amazon bestseller, but we brought it home. We self-published it. So I give it away free now on the website at sugaraddiction.com. And there's a sugar quiz there. You can take that. But the book is probably the best way. And in January, we always have a Quit Sugar Summit, and we interview we've interviewed you. You're going to be on it. So there's a lot of, experts. And really over the years, like I've changed my diet to, a lot more animal products and close to carnivore occasionally. And from vegetarian, because of literally the brain healing stuff that I believe in that. And that happened as a result of listening to these experts and kind of forming a unified theory, and then working on, the rest of the year with all of these other people, the coaching and the groups and all that kind of stuff. It just, the solutions that we use today that are successful, we've got over 1,000 written testimonials. They evolved over time, the last 6 or 7 or 8 years. And now, and again, they're not perfect. We've done a lot wrong and we've learned a lot, but pretty much if someone can understand, and I call it buying into Mikey's little fantasy. If they can just give me 90 days, and they can decide on their own after that, and we're adults, right? We can, like, you've tried every damn diet in the world, right? Just try this sugar abstinence, and no, like I said, you need support. And we have like 2 and 3, and well, no, so now it's like 5 and 4 and 5 and 6 Zoom meetings, support meetings every single day of the week. So, and that's our 30-day challenge, and you'll get an email about that, or you might, whatever. So yeah, there's a lot there, but the base program, if you want to jump in, is a 30-day challenge, which you'll see right on the website. Join the 30-day challenge. And it's under $100. So
Yeah, I'm really thankful to have you mention that, because one of the things I want to do is offer resources. And within the community that I'm in, there's only one person that I know of that does coaching,
okay.
literally this kind of coaching.
Yeah.
And so having other avenues available is tremendous. And so I will be putting the links and all that in the description box below, encouraging people. One of the things I like about the carnivore community that I'm in is that we do the live streaming. There's a lot of live streams every night of the week, just about. On the weekends, during the day, there's all these live streams. They go from an hour and a half to 3 hours a piece.
Wow.
And getting in those live streams, and my thought is, I'm very productive. I'm a writer. I've got to be on it, get those pages rolled out and all that. To sit on a live stream for 2 hours, to me, at first I thought, why would anybody do that? But
Yeah.
now I see the value of that community, of the interaction, and the people there are in the chat rooms talking to the people that are on the screen. Usually there's 4 or 5 people on screen at the same time.
What community is this?
This is the carnivore community on YouTube.
Oh, it's a YouTube. Okay.
YouTube carnivore community. Yes.
Got it.
Yes, there's dozens of them, and more popping up all the time
Right.
within this hub that we have. So
Yeah, I see Ken Berry on Monday nights at live. They're pretty populated. Those are big.
Homestead How, Carrie is very active, and then Intentional Carnivore is another one that's on live streams a lot. And so once you get into those groups, then you'll see the offshoots coming off of them, and other other live streams that come off of
Yeah, I
those.
interviewed Rob Kiltz yesterday, and he's got he does thing at 5 o'clock in the morning Eastern time, so it's like 2 o'clock in the morning Central time or Pacific time.
Wow.
But every morning, Monday through Friday.
Wow.
Yeah, the
There's
live.
another guy who does it at midnight. He calls it the Late Show, and he and two or three people get on there at midnight,
Wow.
talk for an hour or two. Yeah.
I'm gonna get more into that. I love those kinds of communities, so that's great.
Oh, and they're so kind and so supportive. I don't know what it is about eating meat, but it just seems to calm everybody down. And everybody is so loving and
Oh, look,
helpful.
I mean, Joan tells a story in another book. There's a bunch of people that are very honest about this. Joan's very honest about it. Like she literally to this day has problems with her daughters because she was such a bitch. Like she was really mean and raging all the time. And one of the telltales when she got off sugar, she was 12 or 15 days in, she realized she hadn't raged in 12 or 15 days. Like she hadn't yelled at anyone.
Yeah.
And there was another woman that she called herself the shrew, like she was just nasty. And then when you get off it, and I have known Joan for, I don't know, 15, 12, 15 years. And she was rough. She was a mean lady, you know what I mean? And she like now is like the calmest, peaceful, you know. I told her, I'm not talking out of school. I told this to her face, and I've talked to her about a thing. So she knows about it, and she agrees. She like her life changed. So that I think if people were really understanding that maybe some of this raging at their children or their spouse is not them because they always hate themselves after. Everyone does, you know, that if they realize that it was their diet and their blood sugar dysregulation, then they would jump on these kind of programs quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels so good to be calm. It feels so good.
It
Well,
is.
my
It's kind of a calm. I call it carnivore zen. Yeah, yeah.
carnivore's in. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to talk about the carnivore's in.
yeah, it is. It's
Thank you
carnivore.
so much for spending time with us today. I truly
You.
appreciate it.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye now.
Bye bye.